You did this to me! It's all your fault!
In this video, I dive into the movie Annabelle Comes Home. We will discuss the storyline, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and character. Additionally, we will cover the movie's production details and box office performance. Finally, we'll private reviews and share personal reaction. So let's get started. While Toy Story 4 is expected to say no, I at the box office for a second weekend. Two smaller budget films will try to create niches for themselves in between the Pixar's film and next week. Spider-Man Far From Home. One is Universal Working Titles Battle inspired comedy yesterday, while the other is Warner Bros. And New Land's latest installment in the Conjuring series, Annabelle Comes Home. Warner Bros. And New Land's Annabelle Comes Home collected a strong 3.5 million in Tuesday night previous. The supernatural thriller is expected to earn $30 million over its first 5 days in theater. Annabelle Comes Home is the third Annabelle movie and seventh entry in the Conjuring franchise, Preview ticket sales are in line with horror titles like Part 3. Election year $3.6 million. The Curse of LA La Llorona $2.8 million. Those members are slightly above 2014 Annabelle, which earned $2.1 million in previous. Annabelle Comes Home is on pace for one of the lowest doubt debut in the Conjuring universe. The first Annabelle movie marked the smallest budget with $37 million, the biggest opening weekend in the franchise belonged to The Nun with $53 million. Gary Dobersman wrote and is directed by Annabelle Comes Home. It follows two demonologists played by series West Patrick Wilson and Vera, who attempted to stop the possessed Annabelle doll from wreaking more havoc by scalding her in locked room and reuniting the previous holy blessing. The couple's young daughter, Mckenna, becomes a clash after Annabelle awakens evil spirit in the room. Along with Annabelle Comes Home, this weekend sees the release of Universal's and working titles Yesterday, a musical biopic that envisions award where nobody remembers the Beatles is tracking to debut with $10 million. Danny Boyle directed by Yesterday, with stars Himesh Patel, Cad, MC Cannon and Ed Sheeran. Despite new offering Disney and Pixar's Toy Story 4 is expected to lead domestic box office chart again. The animated prequel launched with the $118 million last weekend and has since generated $135 million in North America and $258 million worldwide. Annabelle Comes Home review opened yesterday with a promising $7.2 million start, including $3.6 million in Thursday preview. Yes, that's a lot of the opening day, coming from this Tuesday starting as early as 5 p.m. review. But I would argue that New Line and Warner Bros. We are expecting the bulk of the money to come from the Friday to Sunday frame. The Wednesday debut was about getting early word of mouth and, to be extent is mattered. Getting 2 extra days before Netflix is unleashed Stranger Things Season 3 on Wednesday. And we are talking about a $27 million budgeted horror flick, so it does not have to break record to break even. That said, the film earned a B from the cinema score, but bad for a horror movie. And the reviews have been more than it is great. It is one place more for the fans than in an or Annabelle creation. I would partially blame the Nun. When the worst movie in your comedic universe is the most successful, $366 million on a $22 million budget. That can poison the well in a way that a mostly ignored stinker does not. But as the speculations over a front-loaded weekend result that has not happened yet. The Grey Dobersman directed with Anne co-written with James Wan. Sequel to Annabelle creation and a prequel to the Conjuring concern the titled doll working havoc and targeting the parents, Patty Wilson and Vera Farmiga, young daughter, and her babysitter. A good fun added some wordplays as a Conjuring JR installment, arriving as one of the softest R-rated horror movies I have seen in a while. The question now is whether it play like Transformer, The Last Night, Baby Driver or somewhere in between. If it front bells are still decent 4.3x multiplier from Wednesday to Sunday, like Transformers 5, $68.5 million from $15.6 million Wednesday. It still make it to be $31 million for the Wednesday Sunday frame, which is only low end of studio expectations. If it lags out like the eager Riot Action Committee, $29.5 million from a $5.7 million Wednesday. It gets closer to $37 million that would essentially match the $37 million Friday to Sunday debut of the Annabelle in 2014 and the $35 million Sunday launch of Annabelle. One reason for concern is that Annabelle 3 actually earned more of its money on Wednesday compared to Tuesday 51%, then Transformers 5 49% or 15.7% million from an $18 million Tuesday preview gross. The nightmare scenario, as always, is Rent, which earned $17 million over Thanksgiving weekend in 2005 from a $4.7 million Wednesday. The scenario would still give Annabelle Comes Home $26 million Wednesday to Sunday, but now disaster seemed to be the narrative of the summer. I would expect a big drop on Thursday since the Die Hard showed up yesterday, and the general audiences will wait until the weekend. But we will see. It's a fun movie, especially for fans of the brand. So I would be unpleasantly surprised if it collapses between the now and Sunday. After that, it's about a web tree wearing the one-two punch of Spider-Man Far From Home and Stranger Things Season 3 Good luck. When it comes to evaluating the financial performances of top movies, it is not about what a film grosses at the box office. The true tale is told when production budget, P&A talent participation, and utter cost collide with box office grosses and accelerate. Revenues from VOD to DVD and TV to get close to their mysterious end of the questions. That line is repeating our most valuable blockbusters tournament for 2019 using data called by seasoned and trusted sources. After basically furnishing the dollhouse by writing the first two Annabelle film from a pitch by the Conjuring creator, Jim Pan to hatch a prequel. Screenwriter Gary Dobermans got his chance to make his directing debut on the third installment of the Fight franchise. Back for a cameo are perennially haunted paranormal investigator Ed and Lorraine Warren with a haunted house. Their daughter is a babysitter and it titled doll for out purpose. The result were repost $231 million in worldwide box office. Aladdin in Images Endgame fans did not like home as much as previous sequel creation, giving the latest movie 2 stars on comscores again. Engine's post track to its predecessor 4 stars till Annabelle Comes Home was one of the few horror movies to work at least year's global box office. Woody Buzz Lightyear and Forky are still ruling the box office. Despite solid debut from the newcomer, Annabelle Comes Home and yesterday Disney and Pixar's Toy Story 4 easily dominated North America. The fourth chapter in the animated series collected another $58 million, boosting its domestic haul to the huge $237 million after 2 weekends in theater. Toy Story 4 is already the fourth highest grossing movie of the year. The first three spot Avengers Endgame, $841 million Captain Marvel, $428 million and Aladdin, $306 million. All belong to Disney as well. Overseas Toy Story 4 picked up a solid $80 million for a global tally of $1496 million. Warner Bros. And New Line's Annabelle Comes Home, the seventh installment in the Conjuring universe. Harry Best showing among new releases. The supernatural horror films debuted in second place, earning $20 million over the weekend and $31.2 million since launching on Wednesday. While those ticket sales represent a franchise low debut of the Conjuring series, its low production budget will mark a win for its studio. Gary Jubbersman wrote and directed by Annabelle Comes Home, which stars Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga, and the spooky sequel kicked off at the international box office with $45 million, taking its worldwide start to $76 million. Female accounted for 57% of opening weekend audiences, with 53% of crowd under the age of 25. Overseas, Annabelle Comes Home brought in $45 million for a global startup of $76 million. The interesting part of this weekend in the counter programming that's out here, said Jeff Goldstein, Warner Bros. Domestic distribution chief. The fact that yesterday did so strongly and Annabelle Comes Home get to $31 million shows the health of our business. It can be tricky to find your audiences. We just have to be more strategic. In a closed universes and working title, yesterday launched with a $70 million from 2603 venues. The romantic comedy follows an aspiring songwriter, a newcomer Hamish Battle, who after a freak accident discovered he is the only person who remembers the Beatle. Yesterday was directed by Danny Boyle and written by Richard Curtis, a writer with the catalog of John, Paul George and Ringo's greatest hits don't come cheap, so Universal is hopping yesterday. has a long and winding road and theatre. The Jukebox musical pulled in $7.7 million from foreign market, bringing its weekend total to 24.7 globally. Yesterday appealed to an older female audiences. Women represented 56% of ticket buyer, while 75% of moviegoers were over the age of 25. It carries a cinema score. We know our audience is older. Jim Origin versus President of Domestic Distribution pointed out that group does not necessarily run out opening weekend. Our audiences score on post track and Rotten Tomatoes are tremendous that combined should lead us to a long, healthy run at the domestic box office. A little further down on domestic box office start is Avenger Endgame, which returned to the top 10 after Disney re-released the blockbuster with an unfinished, deleted scene that did not make it into the initial film. The special screening, which also included a video introduction from director Anthony Russo and a sneak peek at Spider-Man Far From Home, is in a bid to take down Avatar as the biggest movie of all time. Avengers Endgame added another $5.5 million in its 10 weekend of release, almost a 200% jump in a ticket sale. That'll bring its box office receipt to the $841 million in North America and $2.76 million worldwide. The new numbers put Forbes roughly $26 million behind Avatar, which has remained the highest grossing film of all time for nearly a decade with $2.78 million in global ticket sales. In fourth place, Disney's Aladdin generated $9.3 million in its sixth weekend in theater, pushing it past the $300 million market at the domestic box office. The live action remake is new earned $306 million in North America and $568 million internationally, rounding out to be top 5 universes and Illuminations The Secret of Life Parts 2 with $7 million. The animated sequel has now earned $131 million in North America. Another box office milestone, Lionsgate John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum crossed $300 million worldwide. The Keanu Reeves and led sequel picked up $3 million this weekend, taking its domestic tally to $161 million. Among specially releases, Sony Pictures Classic debuted Maiden on 6 screen. The documentary about the first all-female creature sailed around the world made 500 to averaging. Meanwhile, CBS Films expanded Paramount Ran Howard's son. 84 also brought The Last Black Man in San Francisco to additional theaters across the country. It earned the $482 million in sport outing, where it is playing in the 155 venues. The drama, which debuted as Sundance, has grossed $2 million to date. Elsewhere, Neon Broadfield rose to 16 minute theater, collecting to $63 million during its second weekend of release, pushing the musical drama to $135.0403 million. As a whole, the domestic box office is down almost 10%. The Lion King and the Fast and Furious represents Hobbs and the Shaw can help reserve the decline in ticket sales and push their summer to record height. It scares us just thinking about it. Before calling upon its own terms, manning cinematic universe of cast, object, and the malevolent. Spirit James want to be the conjuring among the most terrifying horror film of the 21st century. Opened with these words back in 2013. They were spoken by a pair of young nurses haunted by the Annabelle, a bizarrely compelling collected item that seized by a sinister pressure, aiming to be eventually possess a human spirit. The 196th case of the Annabelle served as our isolated introduction to Ed and Lorraine Warren played throughout the series by the dedicated Judy Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga with spiritual, a pair of religious paranormal researchers who contained the evil interim of ominous contact before the conjuring launched into its own story. As Ed Warren put it was just better to keep the journey in the bottle instead of destroying the doll. I resist this context reads a bite like homework as most something something universe summaries often do. Nevertheless, it's an important setup for the latest and the only sufficiently creepy franchise spin off Annabelle Comes Home, which takes that some journey out of the bottle some year after the nurses get rid of it. In a way, this is the chronologically Annabelle movie as well secretly wanted while watching The Conjuring years ago. It is actually surprising that it took nearly half a dozen sequels and underwhelming byproduct like The Curse of La Llorona or The Nun to show us what happened when the Warners added another item into their growing family of locked away demons. If only the half backstory could also meet our expectations, or at least match the logic of the previous two Annabelle film. In this installment by debut director Gary, the scribe for the earlier two Annabelle movie, we pick up exactly where the opening scene of The Conjuring left off. After an eventful car ride that announced the severity of Annabelle's menace, the Warrens decided to contain the doll in a blast glass case in their residence, away from the eyes and ear of their precious 10-year-old. Dr. Judy, played by the soulful, gifted actresses with astronauts beyond the ear. A totally normal kid considering the circumstances who among us would have turned out okay if we raised on a haunted house by demonologists' parents constantly, making the headline. Judy gets pulled in a school all the same, having trouble even recollecting enough friend to come to her birthday celebration. While most of the kids are meant to be her, Judy seemed to have lucked out with her affable babysitter Mary Ellen. The charming teenager happily signed on the task to look after the troubled kid while the Warners take off an overnight trip. A gifted like her mother, she even gets her own. I see that people scene. Jodie appears to be unusually mature about her views on death and the afterlife, at least enough to advise Mary Ellen's firebrand of a friend Daniel, who still harbors wound about her deceased father. If only that were be adequate for Daniel, her pain proved to be so deep that she ends up being the one of to sneak into the forbidden room of artifact to communicate with her father, only to eventually awaken whatever inside of Annabelle. Along with his cinematographer Michael Berg's Jabber's safety utilizes every nook and cranny of the Warren's house for maximum spontaneous. Predictably well choreographed scene in the artifact room are the film's strongest, and yet, while it's fun to be here in the company of all girls scared who have to survive a sleepover fright fest, the scare of the Annabelle comes home. Don't push the envelope much further than creaky forebread and tease horror hidden from the camera, only to reveal second letter of generic jump scare. But the real problem here is the lack of a sincere story. Daniel's initial and completely impossible break into the prohibited room, clearly marked with various warning signs, followed by her opening up Annabelle case labeled with a massive positively to not open notice, makes every little scene. We only vaguely comprehend how a curious teen could be that fearless, and only Mildy sympathizes. There is an inherent curiosity in horror films that has drawn me toward them as an adult. Perhaps it's the cornice, or maybe the mayhem tucked in shoes. Perhaps I am just demented with a sense of humor that horror films that I avoided as a kid are more than a passing interest for me. I am drawn into them more of the technical aspect of the filmmaking. First-time director Gary has extensive background on the film's antagonist and horror in general, having written Annabelle. Annabelle creation is and none. Yet when I reflect on the Annabelle Comes Home, I am left with an empty feeling. No, the empty feeling is not the glass case used to house Annabelle. My feeling has more to do with the fact that Jober's narrative structure, who wrote the story with series producers James Van felt exceptionally limp. Ed and Lorraine Warren, Patrick Wilson, and Vera Farmiga, respectively, are an integral part of the story. as we bring Annabelle to best, knowing that simply liking Annabelle in a box is insufficient. The Warrens have a pious holy blessing to keep Annabelle's evil at bay. The Warrens focus on their family while continuing their demonology exploit. Their grown up daughter, Judy, has become the subject of ridicule at school because of her parent. But a protective night neighbor, Mary Allen, defends her, while Daniel's catty Serif marvel after the idea of what the Warrens do for a living. The Warrens have Judy in Mary Ellen's care for an overnight, and that's when the sun began. I say fun because Annabelle comes home as exceptionally strong fun house atmosphere. Sure, some of the jump scare are probably a little tried and true, but once Annabelle is on the loose, the woman's world are turned upside down and inside out. I found myself surprised a number of times though, and I don't like surprises. Mckenna Gray's performances is the highlight of the film. She had an innocence about her that aimed on the attention, while at the same time, the character's innocence was reserved because they knew what her parents did for a living. Despite many attempts to shield her from their work, Madison's lesbians did an effective job at playing coy and then getting creepy out by the whole experience. My biggest disappointment and the reasons why I think the film does not work as well as it could with Daniel. Cathy Sheriff's performances was strong, but the character's motivation were not believable, and this is fundamental issue with the story. I suppose for the time the film is set in and her own situation. The syntax makes sense, but the bond between the three girls does not gel. Annabelle comes home, works on a technical level, but the story leaves a plot to be desired still. This film has me curious about the rest of the Conjuring universe that Warren has embarked on. I am looking forward to what the future holds. In a country that should probably thinking about retaming, there is a comparable backspasky nagging woven into the premise of the Annabelle films, of which Annabelle's Come Home is the third, and maybe the most hyper and generic. Annabelle is one of those creepy Victorian dolls that has been a staple of horror films for decades. In her bangs and her big tail, with a shallow face marked by the sun gun, but people type popping eyes, blood scratches, and a ripe smile. She bears a marked resemblance to Ray Dummy in the 1978 Anthony Hopkins' psycho thriller. The fixed gleam of hearts promise a great deal of mischief, and Annabelle Come Home. In the almost completely and what the hell, let's go to hell, we deliver it. If this movie had been made several decades ago, Annabelle would likely have been a female Chucky, a German figurine, wreaking violent havoc. But the film's annoyingly arcane premise demand that the audiences understand, and Annabelle is not herself possessed. No way. The doll was never possessed. Our character declared it was used as a conduct. What this means is that Annabelle, even she is portrayed as a dark and dangerous devil doll, is not coming to life. She is a changeling, the spirit around her, acting as a lightning rod for evil. Do you get the distinction? I actually think I do. Do you care? I think I could not care less. The grand result of all this cheesy metaphysical heavy lifting is that Annabelle Comes Home is a relentless but awkward through everything at the viewer awkward thriller that mixes ghost, looming spirit, and yes, inanimate object coming to life. With the figure of the Annabelle not so much at the scary center of the action as existing alongside it. She is a conduit, all right, and a mascot, and a source of all trouble, but mostly she is a film's emblem, the hood ornament of its cheap brand, and if you take her out of the equation, which is not hard to do since conduct qualities aside, she is barely in the equation. You are left with one more added mashup of a haunted house thriller and the exorcist, which is the anything goes formula of the Conjuring films. These are religious horror movies for people who would channel search through the devil himself. The Annabelle films are prequel, Conjuring universe, and the first film that have way second joy is that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. As he faithfully eager to live Christian's devil buster Ed and Lorraine Warren did not even make an appearance in the first two movies, but in his own hand to set up Annabelle Comes Home, a haunted house thriller that takes place almost entirely in a roomy dark shadowed suburbs home, which is done up in the conflicting pattern of floral wallpaper and a mutated rainbow of gloomy autumnal 70s color. Ed, who's played by the Wilson as the backbone of Exorcist, and Lorraine, embodied by the Formica, with their righteous tenderness, have been at a paranormal investigation for a while now, and are generating some headline. They have got a room in their home, stuffed with all the occult artifacts they have gathered from their adventure. It's like a museum of the ghoulish price of break, and truth is right here in the ground floor. In what might have been a sprawling extra bedroom, it functioned in the film like the basement you are not supposed to go into. Its centerpiece is a case of scared glass taken from a church, in which Annabelle decides she is locked up in there so that he can't do her mischief. But on a night when he was parents 10-year daughter, Judy Mckenna Grace is at home with her two high school babysitter, the saintly blonde Marge Brady, Mary Ellen, and the sneaky dark Nancy. Like Daniels, all hell break loose. That's because the Daniels fixated on the growing legend of the rampants. Can't resist going into the ghost museum and poking around. And of course, just about the first thing she does is to be unlock Annabelle's case. Beware, the contract is loose. The Warren's home look like the sort of place where you want to sit black and wish bad TV. Watch the characters in this movie periodically do. But then the scary stuff happen, and in its reproduction spirit world, why it is like more and TV directing his first feature. Gary Bubblesman, the screenwriter of the first two Annabelle films, as well as in known how to sequence a few drop of anti-capture straight out of the audiences. He makes clever atmospheric use of the bad figure. 1971 hit, Day After Day, especially in a moment when he extends the song's piano motif over and over, turning it into a have a nice day version of Tubular Spell. But there is a paradox to his skill. The fake scaring, Annabelle Comes Home, are scarier than the real scare. That's because when it comes to what should be the film, Heart of Darkness, there is no dread there. A snarling on devil, a werewolf out of the howling, a white-haired priest who turn into the one of those ghosts who will stare at you from across the street, like a spectre out of the industries, or hereditary, a typewriter tapping with me. Jennings' hand is the armor springing to life. But then why can't Annabelle come to life? Never mind, name your fear trigger, and it's probably there. Somewhere in Annabelle Comes Home. It looked like a horror film, but it's really the horror equivalent of speed dating. The one thing that becomes abundantly clear after watching this third entry on the Annabelle series, which is part of the so-called Conjuring universe, is that the closer these spin-off films are to the central figure of this universe, real-life paranormal investigator, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the better they are. In my estimations, the Conjuring films, both directed by James Wan, set a near bar for modern ghost story, both in terms of taking the spirit world, curses, and the poisonous seriously, and also be delivering good and fashion scare. So this is no small amount of excitement that the presence of the Warners in the Annabelle Comes Home make it better movie. Image courtesy of Warner Bros. Picture. The Warners are not the state of the show, but it makes obsession comes in both the beginning and end of the new film. And anything that makes a movie more aligned with them is plus in my book. The film opened with the couple talking possession of the creepy Annabelle doll and realizing as soon as on the drive home that human being in this immediate vicinity is cause for concern. Forced to stop the scene of an accident. The physically enhanced Lawrence began to see the faces of the dead from a nearby cemetery, as well as the confused and scared ghost of the person who has just died in the accident. All of whom seemed drawn to her and agitated at the presence of the doll in the back seat. When the virus finally get home, they not only lock Annabelle in the familiar glass case we have seen in other movies, but they bring in the prayers to be skilled and the evil presence in the case and the room legend has a warnings and the room spiritually sealed once a month. Outside of this proglos, almost entirely of the Annabelle Comes Home take place with the wall of the Warren's household, which is both moved at the pace of the exponentially by making every minute we have to spend in a home get more and more conflicting. There is nothing we want more by end of the movie than to be out of the house. Most of the films take place in the space of just few overnight hours, while the Warrens are out of town, leaving their 10 years old daughter Judy and Mckenna at home with the babysitter Mary Ellen. Welcome to the jungle. Obviously, Jodie has lived with the Warrens her entire life, so the bizarre and troubling nature of their work is second hand to her. But it has made her the victim of the bullying at school. Grace has made a career recently of playing younger incarnation of some very interesting character, including Tonya Harding, Janivers in Captain Marvel. But to see her really shine, check her out in The Gifted, in which she plays a wealthy, intelligent kid who is uncomfortable with the way her brains make her stand out. Out of one of the film's more interesting character is Mary Ellen's best friend, who seems like a bite of wild child and troublemaker. When she finds out Mary Ellen is babysitting for the Warrens, she insists on being invited over so she can do a bite of snooping. At first, we believe Daniel as just being a brat who eventually sets loose a great deal of the trouble. But it's soon revealed that her interest in the paranormal and afterlife is rooted in something much more substantial and personal. But this vulnerability also makes her potential victim to demons looking for a weakness in her soul. The reason Annabelle Comes Home works so well is that it's relentless. It really lets up to the end attempt to scare the living crap out of us. There are few, if only any moment, where the audiences can take a breath because there's always something else lurking around the next corner. What you may recall from previous Conjuring and Annabelle movie is that the doll lives in a locked room in a Warren's home. A home filled with dozens of haunted and cursed objects. A wedding dress, a small uniform, a typewriter, a piano, an ancient television, old coins, and the list goes on. When the snooping Daniels goes into the sealed room, she eventually breaks open Annabelle's case, but she also touches activities everything else in that room. All of which seem to be taken on the uglier, more terrifying energy in the presence of the doll. So during the course of the movie, we are not just dealing with the Annabelle who becomes almost secondary, at least in terms of second term. As the movie goes on, we are dealing with the legions of face of ghosts, including a few that may show up in future. Offshoot movies like The Nun and The Curse of La Lorena. In a way, Annabelle is a like greater size haunted house package. Writer director Gary Juberman, who had a hand in writing all three Annabelle's movies and The Nun, as well as the two-part 8 adaptations, not only has a genuine sense of what makes the seemingly doll so terrifying, but he also has a grasp on what he can make just about my objects scary. But it's truly impossibly immature and layered performances from Grace that we are able to be navigate this classic spoke house with anything resembling our minds intact. One of the most interesting aspects of the Annabelle movie is that it is one of his unique personality. Despite all of them being guided by the one-led concerning universe of the character, the result is still work of the different quality. The first is not good. The other two are quite strong of different reasons. Annabelle Comes Home feels the most at home in the world of the Wardens, and that's exactly what it belongs. Above all else, it makes me beyond excited for the next Conjuring movie in September 2020. We just began shooting earlier this month. Determined to keep Annabelle from wreaking me more havoc. Demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren bring the possessed doll to the locked artifact room in their home. Placing her safely brings scared glasses and enlisting prayers only blessing. But an unholy night of horror awaits as Annabelle awakens the evil spirit in the room. Who all set their sights to only new target, the Warren's 10-year-old daughter, Judy and her friends. One of the absolute things with Annabelle Comes Home is the extremely eerie and creepy setting in movie. Director writer Gary did a fantastic job of establishing an atmosphere that immersed audiences into a 1970 world that felt like a total nightmare. In some scenes, we had very template areas where only a ray of light more be shown to highlight a character or something else. In other instance, the scene would be covered a thick fog or even more frightening dark room with maybe only a flashlight available. All of this created the perfect stuff setup for ghosts and jump scare to be really kept you on edge for the entire movie. After the spooky scenes and situation are all steps, the film really peaks into the second gear, which is a solid cinematography. If you are a fan of this Conjuring franchise, then you will be probably notice some familiar camera artists when it came to be showing some of the ghosts, the more recycled scare tactics. He was still pretty effective in this movie, nevertheless. To be the more specific, there was a scene in this film that looked extremely similar to the scene of the nun from The Conjuring 2016. Aside from that, my personal favorite occurrence was whenever there was multiple things happening in the same frame. If you pay close attention, there often would be a very subtle thing happening in the background of the scene where the main character could be doing something else. This type of the camera work really helps to mess with your mind of viewer because you might be focused on what the main character is saying while something else could be moving in the character of your eye. This was just as another excellent way to really drum up the fear factor in this film. One other positive here was how the camera shot were used in the movie so subvert your expectations. You could almost tell that directors anticipated the expectations of the audiences and went ahead and tried with those expectations. Sometimes they would pay with a well-charmed jump scare, and sometimes they would be a complete send off. These films really does a good job of making the jump scare count rather than just throwing them for the sake of a cheap reaction. As for the acting in the Annabelle Comes Home, overall it got the job done. I thought Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson were solid. Although I kind of wish they had more screen time. The strongest performances probably came from both Madison Eastman and Mary Ellen and Katie Salif Daniel. I think the reason why they stand out so much beside being the lead characters in the movie was because of their emotional reaction, which very relatable, were really easy to be empathizes and connect with them in this specific moment. Beside these two main female leads, I thought it was an unconventional supporting character in this film that was great. The weddings room that housed the girl's object practically felt like a character in itself. There were so many interesting items throughout it that each seemed to be expressed a different story as we experienced them. Speaking of which, that room felt like a treasure trove of the potential future movies, similar to how the Conjuring franchise spawned. Annabelle Come Home is gifted with what might be the ultimate haunted house setup. Having fully established the dead-eyed Annabelle doll as a try not to be messed with in the Conjuring franchise, and the two previous Annabelle spin-off is a neat idea to then set it to loose in the spooky interfact. Legend home of the franchise veteran Ed and Lorraine Warren joke in the well-known babysitter drop, and Annabelle Come Home should be a Friday night funhouse blast. Sadly, after the well-crafted scare of David F. D. Sandberg's Annabelle creation, this sequel never capitalizes on their killer concept. It starts well enough with a prologue centered around Wilson's and Farmiga Warrens. They are the much needed heart of all the conjuring verse, and their warm lived in the dynamic never fails to connect. But from there, the film has to be delivered. a whole extra setup to get the main plot. Their daughter Judy's curse is being left in the care of Goody Two Shoes babysitter Mary's Asman for a few days. When Annabelle will once again cause havoc thanks up to the maddening of Mary's Antigon's ball. If it takes too long to get going, Annabelle Come Home also never quite kicks into full gear. It's a film content to roll out every glitches one by one, without twisting them into something new and fun. The doll itself takes a back seat for much of the current term, instead compelling a spirit to terrorize the teen trio, from killer brides and creepy priests to the more effective folklore inspired ferryman, who feels most likely to get his own spin off. More laughably, there is the hellhound of Essex, who not only feels ingorgeous but stretches their budget beyond its capabilities. It's not completely without merit the introduction of words in the box board game fairly merely Leon successfully into the film's spooky sleepover vibe. The performances are enough, and it deal out some welcomed in camera fights, but the characters are painfully slow on the update, considering they are in such an overt horror movie scenario and the confusion. That said, Annabelle, loose leaf Seraphi's character both largely unlikable and woefully inconsistent, sluggishly paced and lacking in inspiration. Annabelle Comes Home proves that is the all work best when the filmmaker are willing to really play within it. Annabelle's Come Home attempt to bring viewer into the home of the Conjuring universe and break the medical cycle the series has been going through. Frankly, outside of mainline Conjuring films and Annabelle creation, the series actually has not proved its what it is fans by now have been incredibly by lackluster and created some double on whether the Conjuring universe has a strong enough legs to stand on. So the real question is, does Annabelle's latest outing give fan to scare they so desperately give and start to erase my doubt that the series has lost any luster? Well, yes and no. Frankly, Annabelle Come Home does not reinvent its formula enough to be a fresh entry and give even the effort made by writer director Gary Juberman to create an airy atmosphere and utilize the foreground and background are constantly bogged down by repetitiveness mode of the scare are built up through characters walking down a dog away in complacence until a jump scare rudely the film's all the pace and quiet, especially in the film's third act. These kinds of sequences are pretty much just one after another, and eventually our scare became predictable and less scary as the film goes on. Like I said before, Dubermas definitely does his best to create an atmosphere and moment that up levels of creepiness past what more recent installment have brought. Seeing those artifacts the ferryman, a new addition to the series, lurking in the shadows or seeing something move and change in the background was great. Even having everything take place in one area made you feel a little trapped. Even I do wish there was eventually a point where the house turned into a sort of maze, even if it's a little glitch, just to emphasize its Annabelle power and how trapped the girls are. There is still enough effort put into this show how tired. Annabelle's sleep is through camera and audio work. There is a great sequences where one of the girl is watching TV and start to invisible a noise. But the audio began to change from what's happening on the TV to an audio log talking about the ferryman. The change happened too seamlessly, and it's none of the defining scene that's a true conjuring moment. Honestly, what impressed me most about the Annabelle Comes Home and what differentiated it from the more mediocre entries is how much detail is put into the character and a world building for the Venus artifact room. Watching the film is almost like watching The Conjuring 2.5 as a hint and detail about the new horror and the artifact room and the great character make it feel right at home with James Van's vision for this series. Rather than slowly focusing on AJ, Wilson, Danny, Lorraine, the film actually focuses on their daughter, Judy, who shares the same intrigue and intuition about the supernatural as her parents. I love great performances here, and it feels just as easy to connect to Jodie's struggle with how people perceive her because of her parents' profession and even her intrigue for the supernatural. She is not necessarily scared of ghosts or the dead, but more afraid of the evil spirit that haunt her. It's easily one of the best performances of series, and another example of why Grace is someone to keep a close eye on the future. There are also some other great performances from the two other female lead that make this scare, even the more obvious ones, more effective. With Manny Allen, they are not as it is possible as they normally would be, add some interesting emotional depth. It was cool to see Manny Allen see the violence as normal, for the most part, and it was kind of nice to the Nakati have an emotional stake in the situation, as well as a solid arc. Both Iceman and Royce really sell the scare with their performances, and there is a good amount of effort that makes them more than just side character. The only weak link in the best friend character, Bob, as they seem to be, only exists to serve as a running gag. The whole Bob Scout Bell joked are incredibly flat and is forced to create humor that really was not needed. Annabelle Come Home has also ignited my interest in what else the Conjuring universe can offer with the new spirit and artifact the film offer. The design are intriguing and even most of the backstories are left in the dark soul if they ever get on films, there is more to explore. Personally, the Ferryman would be an interesting story to explore because of the character design and simply story. The haunted Japanese armor would be cool to explore as a supernatural. Japanese conjuring movie just sound awesome on paper. And even the fairly mealy board jam sequences was pretty suspenseful because I was sure what to expect. Honestly, the entire sequences of Katy going through the room was very reminiscent of the cellar scene in the cabin in Woods. Personally, I kinda wish the Bloody Bride was a Lerona just so there would be some kind of payoff for the film being in the Conjuring universe, and also seeing the entire CJ Bloodhound just felt out of place here. Annabelle is also a little underutilized and with time that I almost forget that she was in the films because of how little we see of her while her presence can definitely be felt, and that could be what Man and Juberman were going for. I think there maybe could have been a little more time put into the connection between her and Judy. There's actually a great moment where the real Annabelle doll is shown in the short moment that I thought was very clever and funny. The ending was also surprising, as it was comforting and ends up being a very touching tribute for Lorraine, as he passed back in the April rather than end on something suspenseful or scary. Annabelle Comes Home offers a more positive outlook on its supernatural aspect. Lorraine's final speech to Katie is very touching, and it shows why the Warrens are truly the heart and soul of the franchise. I think this is more positive take, a great way to say tribute to Lorraine and to have a more expected kind of the ending. At the end of the day, it's easy to look Annabelle Comes Home as just another movie in the Conjuring universe, but it would actually inspire viewer to look a little this deeper. It's funny for a franchise so terrifying. It's the inherent warmth of the Conjuring series that makes it directly memorable to cinema inhaling online communication like film, Twitter, and what be told. It's really webbed separately James Wan created extended universe from a whole lot of modern horror. It is so goddamn wholesome that it can almost cross over the barrier into pure great arches. This is of course only makes it more endearing. This is double true for any installment featuring Ed and Lorraine Warren, whose good fall, love, and inherent chemistry for one another often overwhelms whatever real life haunting provide the basis for the film, but the violence were only intriguingly related to in the first place anyway. Gary Annabelle's Come Home, the eighth movie in this bizarre, successfully horror series, and a third in this sub-series about a creepy doll that just can't seem to be get enough when it comes to be ruining life, is perhaps the first installment to fully lean into the noise core aspect of the conjuring when that impulse is paired with a genuinely interesting story, co-written by Van himself. It becomes something truly and oddly lovable. It for a baby of upwards only holds memories. It may be the best films in the franchise, honestly providing an equal measure of solid scare with stick and soap. It may be the best films in the franchise, honestly providing an equal measure of solid scare with stick and soap of the soul like emotional slave. This is a very charming and sweet little movie, one that might make you constantly need to go to the bathroom just so you don't piss yourself when the next jump scare happens. Perhaps the blend of sentiment and scare would not work so well if Annabelle Comes Home were not so solidly charged to this constructed. The film boasts the first concept of the entire Conjuring franchise, as it takes a debate that we see constantly referenced and referred to in the other films, the Warner's house full of barely contained dynamic artifact, and uses it as suppling board for a fully fictional and very effective little horror story. We are given a series of appealing characters, from Judy and Mckenna Grace, the Warren's bully daughter, whose second slide is coming into focus, to Mary Ellen, the athletic babysitter who is in charge of the Warren household while the parents are away, to Daniel, Mary Ellen's best baby friend, who come to be Warren's household looking so raised hell, to perhaps finding the loved one is the other side. When Darius opened the sanctified case that the Annabelle doll sits in, the unleashes the demon within her, who can summon and attract spirit from every twinkle in the room. This includes a possessed game of Feely Melee, an on cathode ray television, a creepy ass clanning monkey, and plenty of other objects perfectly made for additional prequels find out down the road. I have personally never found the Annabelle doll to be very creepy, as she is spooky in that kind of try-hard horror movie way. No child in their right mind would want to play with that. But having her to be this ghostly presence at the edge of the frame, manipulating the everything else that's going on the inside of the house of horror, is incredibly effective in its own right. Duberman's not as strong as a filmmaker as was in, but he comes close enough to be paralleling the glittering camera tensions wrapping style that made the series such a hit. I am not going to be sit here and argue that any given scene here is better than the masterfully constructed sequences in something like Conjuring 2. Because they are not, but he has a better sense of pacing than when does there, as the blood really sank, preventing that installment from being as effective as it might have been otherwise. It's incredibly narratively efficient, smartly moving from sense to scene and scare to scare with ease. There are few awkward moments drawn throughout. It's often very funny, which is something I never expected to say about a Conjuring film. The difference between this is and something like La Reina is that it's initially so, and now how to pay off its jokes in a way much like its scare. Take, for instance, Mayor Allen's love interest. A goofy neighbor's boy named Bob, whom I think is unrelated to the director of The Deer Hunter, whose nickname Bob's God Pass seemed to be quick, throwaway gag, but it keeps coming back, and it keeps paying off, all the way until the end, when it becomes overwhelming funny in its final repetition. Look, I am not going to argue that for a good chunk of the viewing audiences, Annabelle Comes Home won't pushing skeptics away. It will most definitely push away real skeptics, given that the series is about as quiet look as Bob Francis. After all, we are in an age of bitter darkness, where open rules everything around us. Any cornball earnestness of an screen relationship, like the Warrens, might feel silly to some. Wind only post ironic slasher of Aries Esther. But I think that's what makes the Conjuring movie, especially the Annabelle film, so damn necessary and interesting. There are about young women of all cakes exploring the murky water of death. The afterlife, the all of the scary things is between. And a film franchise that showcases the best in them and other. The film was about a young widow whose husband unfailingly began to believe her when she says that their house might be haunted. The second was about a group of the orphans who are confronted with her horror of parental suffering and get a first hand glimpse as to what their absence in the lives of others has led and what that bitterness or the lack can do the human spirit. Finally, the one is about the strength of friendship and love between the young woman, supplying enough light to eradicate the darkness and contain the darkness that threatened to overwhelm them. This next, honestly, is an essential one, and I hope that further installment lean into it can be similar. Only time will tell. I guess because we will keep getting them until they start losing the money. I am still amazed at how much traffic the Annabelle movies have gotten over the year. The Conjuring was a smash hit that no one saw coming, and the first Annabelle movie was kind of seen as a joke. Aspina piece of creepy doll shown for a few seconds in the background during the Conjuring, yet Warner Brothers has not only made a full world building franchise out of the Conjuring movies, number 3 is on the way soon, but also 3 full Annabelle's movie, as will few little of the exporters such as in Nun and the Curse of the La Llorona. I have actually enjoyed the Annabelle movie out of all the spin-off, as they have been continually creepy. If not a bite road, and pretty much pure popcorn jump scare fun. Nothing wild. They are not going to be turning horror industry on its ear like the original. The Conjuring, but they are goofy fun, and the last Annabelle movie was actually really creepy. They start outing to act as a prequel to The Conjuring, explaining how the doll ends up with the Warners, played by Patrick, Cookies, Cutter, and family friendly. Then the other two Altoids future figure the Warners themselves, almost making it feel like a Conjuring movie more than Annabelle one. And Patrick Warner's Vita has just come into the possession of the Annabelle doll of the first time of the first two films were prequel to this, and is being a prequel to The Conjuring in this time frame. And after a short stint, where is German's power, realizes that it is a beacon for evil spirit. Locking of the doll up in a glass window, they all have contained the evil power of the doll and keep it away from the rest of the humanity. Sometime later, they have the daughter Judy, Alan, for the evening, which unleashes a contagion of events that will take the young girl. There some things are hexos and some things definitely are not. All is going well with Mary Allen and the Judy preparing a cake for the young girl's upcoming birthday which no one seemed to be went to go to the due to the parents' creepy spiritual escapades in the local news. But soon things get out of the control. Mary Allen's friend Daniela comes over with an ulterior motive. Her father has just recently died in the car accident, and the poor girl is stricken with grief believing that it was her fault. She figures that by going into the Warner's evil little study den of the spiritual tinker, she can somehow talk to her father and get some closures. The doorway that she opened the wrong one, and soon coming with this all of evil spirit from beyond that are attached to her like a beacon. Annabelle, a fairly tropic film, and is a bit of softer than other of the previous two films are well. Both the previous Annabelle movies have relied strongly on bodies, demon, jump scare, and a fairly soft plot. But even is the almost a family-friendly scarefest, even with a more exciting third duty. Mary Ellen and the Daniels hanging out and having to create some semblance of scareness. The second act gave off a bit more once Daniel accidentally opens the door's catch. But still, there is not a whole lot going on. We got more backstory in Mary Ellen's latest crush. Daniel's dad and Jody's issue. At school, John we get scared. It's not until the third act, when the demons come out to play, that things get exciting. Still, there is very limited scare here. Worst scare or indie films are dedicated to male charm, scare or the audience being able to be demonic spirit or the back shoulder of the character. In a final which is over the little bird too fast. With a little bird, two little personal sacrifices. In fact, the Annabelle Comes Home actually ends on a really high note. Horrifying happens as such it really is not as sexy as auditory Annabelle films at all. And it is competently scared, acted, and directed. The lack of the thrillers make it probably the most boring too. Annabelle Comes Home come to be Blu-ray with a good looking 1080p encode from the digitally shot film. And the result are rather nice. There is some digital noise that's warm over to be slightly. But a period pieces film is never so nice. It is no annoying, it's just more of the background issue in a fairy film. Looking films, period, place, color, Janchuvari, yellow, and also 2014 Annabelle was far from the end of the haunted doll. The Conjuring spin-off did offer a clear explanation for the title character's origin. Annabelle was a spin-off from 2013 successful horror movies of The Conjuring, while The Conjuring movies focus on the exploit of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Annabelle movies center on a supposedly possessed doll that a couple encountered during their career as paranormal investigator. The Conjuring opening scene featured a creepy vignette staring Annabelle and a haunted doll proved so memorable that she soon spawned a movie spin-off of her own. While a real-life Annabelle doll is not as scary looking as the fictional version of the villain, it still managed to inspire a trio of creepy movies. Annabelle opens with a happily married couple, John and Mia, preparing to welcome their first child into the world. Their plans are interrupted when a pair of murderous cultists kill their neighbor and break out John and Mia's home. Attempting to kill them, the police shoot one cultist before the other takes her own life. John and Mia move from Santa Monica to Pasadena to process their trauma but are blocked by paranormal events. Johan and Mia eventually realizes that Annabelle, the doll, is central to their misfortune as the car's toy continually prepare air whenever they try to rid themselves of it. The local priest Father Paris and their kindly neighbor Evelyn discover that he cult who attacked the couple were devil worshippers who intended to summon a demon with their killings. In Annabelle's ending, Evelyn sacrifices her life to Annabelle and the demon so Johan and Mia can live without fear. The demon takes the form of Father Paris and chases Mia out into the apartment building less. But Evelyn takes her place. When Evelyn jumps from the building and dies, the demon and the doll itself both vanish. Johan and Mia live happily ever after in the wake of Evelyn's death, with Annabelle's ending saying that the couple never saw the doll again. Although their daughter Leah was almost killed by the demon, she seemingly lives a normal life, judging by her safety in Annabelle's final scene. The demons attempt to use Annabelle, the doll, to access Mia, and Lee's soul ultimately failed to Evelyn was willing to sacrifice herself to stop their plan while Father Paris was hospitalized by the demon. Evelyn's death ensured that Johan and Mia could rid themselves of demon in the Annabelle. When the second cultist bled on the doll, she completed the ritual to summon a demon and put the couple in peril. The demon demanded the human sacrifices before it could be appeased, which is why it took the form of Father Paris and threatened to kill Mia and Lee. The Conjuring's Annabelle movies all feature this demon who remains a restless spirit for the rest of the trilogy, never succeeding in killing his intended sacrifices, despite Evelyn that is Annabelle's ending. It is tough to imagine Evelyn being sent to hell after sacrificing herself too heroically. Evelyn stopped Annabelle from killing Lee or Mia when she sacrificed herself instead. But this does not necessarily satisfy the demon's demand for soul. It is tough to imagine Evelyn begins sent to hell after sacrificing herself so heroically. So it seems possibly that her sacrifice instead overpowered the demon and effectively tricked it into the submission. This would explain why the sequel's Annabelle Comes Home feature the same demon still trying to capture a sacrificial soul. Annabelle would not need to do this if the demon had been stated when Evelyn died, implying her sacrifices imagine her spare her from hell. Mia Jones never Evelyn died when he jumped from the apartment building, but she had good reason to make these sacrifices. Evelyn sacrificed her life to atone for her daughter Ruby's death in her car accident years earlier, with Alpha's voodoo character solving John and Mia's predicament to make up for her greatest mistake, while the other Annabelle movies focus on young characters who play very role as a joy. Annabelle centers instead on the older Evelyn and her relationship with John and Mia. Evelyn sees something of her younger self in the optimistic pair of newlyweds. At first, it seemed too obvious that Father Paz will be the one to sacrifice himself to save Lee and Mia. The reason that Annabelle became possessed in the first place is that the cultist fled on the door in the opening scene. Although she died soon after, she still managed to complete the demon's summoning ritual that entered their killing spirit around. Annabelle's curse came from the cultist summoning a demon. Abraxas' death was itself unresolved until Evelyn later offered her life in exchange for Mia and Lee's safety. These gestures overpowered the demon's influences. Also, Annabelle vanished after the Evelyn death. She then reappeared in this antique story in the next scene. Viewers should not worry about missing a scene between these moments. This movie felt like the Conjuring series is coming to a close. Is this the final movie? I have no clue. I tried to do some research, but the jury is still out. No final conclusion on whether or not we will get more. The directors or producers have already proved they are willing to branch out. Those have varying results. The Nun was a flop, and I rated it 5.5. Loosely connected to the franchise, Curse of La Llorona was a stand-alone fun and proved they can do horror well outside of the Conjuring universe. Annabelle Comes Home is certainly connected to Conjuring but also stand alone in a way. Read below to define it what I mean. This movie introduced some now ghosts rather than playing on the nun character, which feels Conjuring movies for you. This is the first difference. These new ghosts adequately scary. Also, they lack development or background of any kind. All these ghosts come from the Warren's room. Along with New Hunt, the new actors are also talented in their own right. While the main characters may technically be the Warner's daughter, be babysitter, by Madison Iceman, who I recognize from something but I don't know what and don't care to Google it. These actors are strong enough to carry their own movie, which they basically do. The ones are only present for a small portion of the film and don't help much in the way of defeating Annabelle. The middle section of this movie is story, as well as the development of the two babysitter. While there are some intriguing questions, such as why is this girl obsessed with the haunted room, and is she gonna get with Bob's god ball. The best part came when the character were split up. Okay, those questions confuse you. You will understand if you watch the movie. The characters are forced to confront monsters on their own, which led to some frightening moments. Sadly, Annabelle is not present very much under. If you cut out the Warners from the movie and replace their daughter with some random little girl, you would essentially have the same movie. That's where this film falls. It is very crisp, more so than any other Conjuring film. Even the Nun had some ticket subtitles saved. Even if you are not well used, this movie is your typical babysitter. Gets haunted, must leave kids audio only with a special doll that shows up 3 times. Yes, if this is indeed the final movie for the two words adult, it is bad. A series like The Conjuring, one of the most successful and most creative in existence, deserve better. An actor like Vera Farmiga or Patrick Wilson, who both have elevated their career and turned this series into something special, deserve a better send-off. In this their final movie as Ed and Lorraine Warren. I don't know Lorraine did recently, and this movie was dedicated to her. Give them a conjuring tree. Annabelle Comes Home is yet another reason why the Conjuring franchise has been getting mixed results that are never fulfilling after you are done watching. Because outside 2013, The Conjuring and its sequel, everything else has been labeled as underwhelming Annabelle's creation. To reason why the genre is lame to many Annabelle the Nun. Let me remind you, 2014's Annabelle is the worst horror movie of the decade. And it was not until last December when I skipped The Curse of La Llorona after hearing how bad it was. But this is the third movie I featured to the creepy doll that has no idea what it wants to do. What is story determined to keep Annabelle from wreaking more havoc. Paranormal investigator Ed and Lorraine Warren Vera Farmiga locked the possessed doll in the artifact room in their house. But when the doll awakens, the room's evil spirit. It soon becomes an unholy night of terror for the couple's year-old daughter, Judy. Even the trailers left little to be impressed about its predecessor, were not anything to be high about, especially the sequel. I watched the seventh entry and third installment with an open mind to see if was going to be the one that was going to finally get some genuine scare. Unfortunately, Annabelle Comes Home has not been one of the worst horror movies to be released last year. Gary Robertsman has worked in this universe in the past, as he wrote the previous Annabelle's movie, and he made the directorial debut with this. That was already a warning sign when those movies were to be franchised and written this is as well. If this was given to anyone else, maybe this sequel would have been a lot better. Let's talk about the positives first before getting into what I hate about the movie. The performances were not the worst part. Surprisingly, Mckenna Grace has been one of the most favorite young actresses out there for a while from the work she's been in. And what I liked about her characters in that she is the only one of the brain. And I also liked how she sees dead people like her mother. As for the rest of the performances, Madison Iceman and Katy Sarif did a fine job. Not anything that blew me away when all that needed to do is be for returned. It was also nice to see Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga back as Ed and Lorraine Warren, respectively, outside of what they are usually been in, but they should not have been in a lot of mode with a limited screen time. But outside, the performances and the overall look inside the house, everything else in Annabelle Comes Home is bad when watching any horror movie. It can fail by doing this one job, not being scary. Yet begin and is another movie from the genre that does not come close to being creepy. Testing the patience of those who wanted to be scared, only composed of stupid jump scare. Dobermans incorporate them into a story that is not effective every single time. Creative as the scare might appear to be. Its executions did not work for me because they should not be the predictable. I design another film is a series that follows an absence of tension. This is getting to the point of the dualism whenever there is a scare scene when the camera spans over of the moment. Come back to this starting point where the character was positioned and something appear. It's one thing for a horror movie not to not be scary. But it's a crime when it's so boring. This styles Doberman tried to do in his directing did not stand out in his that since it looked like everything else we have seen before. And that's mainly because the story does not have anything new to say as it just. I would not be stupid enough to walk into a room with a warning do not open sign filled with the haunted stuff and go about touching them. I get here is a backstory for the character of Daniela, who wants to reconnect with her dead father. But does not she know she will cause trouble for everybody in the house? There was a couple of new scary characters that might have a spin-off in the future but really should not for our sake. Even for a jam-rated R movie, there was not anything in here and warranted that rating. Those who are fans of the Conjuring franchise probably won't have any qualm with his entry. But even it has a fairly decent score on Rotten Tomato from critics. And audiences Annabelle Comes Home sucked. Not once did it scare me, and it did the unspeakable thing of being boring. This was just an undead third movie that drags the series down even more in terms of not giving us anything new. As this franchise moves forward, I'm just hoping those who are fans of the Conjuring franchise probably won't have any quarrel with this entry, but even it has a fairly decent score on Rotten Tomato from critics and audiences. Annabelle Come Home sucked. Not once did it scare me, and it did the unspeakable thing. I must rather watch the latter again. This I am not giving to convince you Annabelle Come Home is an amazing horror movie. Nor will this review try and prove that it is a better than most horror movies that are somewhere around 5 deep into a spin-off run. But the latest tale of the haunted doll that was actually a Reggie and doll in real life does a pretty decent job of what it's trying to do and offers up some pretty intriguing and yet ultimately terrifying scenario. Which play right into my own personal fun house of horror's imagination. If you are following the Annabelle series, this is the third stand-alone of spinning off from its 2012 host movie. The Conjuring, however, is the first Annabelle standalone to directly feature the Warrens, played by Patrick Wilson, and their presence helped establish this is as a little bit more than a cash grab. Maybe it still is, but I dig the Warrens, so it's a cool. Annabelle Comes Home is exactly the scale you would be expected to eventually, considering it centers around a married couple who travel the globe taking on a malevolent spirit and just happen to have a kid. Who's gonna need a babysitter when they leave? Right, and let's face it. That babysitter is nearly bound by the cinematic laws of horror movie to have a friend who is intrigued by the walls and just might have a for personal reason she would want to be trapped into that supernatural mojo seeping through that house. Who shares her mother's gift or curse for being able to gap into the supernatural energy. Most of the movie is resting on her shoulder and handle the load for the most part, effectively balancing a line between the common sense and terror as she. As a younger but more experienced when it succumbed to the spook, who bumped in the night. Mary Ellen and Katy Salif plays her BFF, who like the said has a selfish even if this is the story of these people trapped in a crazy as hell situation where they are not just dealing with the Annabelle's doll, but all of the other evil spirit that is dwelling in the room. For me personal visiting the Warren's vault for like a better word. It's really just a quiet locked room. Would be a dream come true. I would be lying outside. I would not be tempted to try and get in. Snoop around and yes, stop. And one point a character asks, what did you touch? And another character answered away. I would have to be everything, but because I believe in this sort of crap. The threat of what could happen is enough to scare the hell out of me. So yes, so tempting but also very terrifying. Director Gary O has been driving the Annabelle franchise from the get-go, relies mostly on building suspense through tension rather than constantly resorting to bullshit jump scare. Thankfully, those are left to minimum and are for the most part effective when he does. Even more impressive is how he creates tension using a doll that does not exactly do anything. You never really see Annabelle's move, but so she just does so on her own shows up under the covers looking creepy as hell. Annabelle Comes Home is more than just a mindless, midsummer's horror flick. is the blueprint of the ultimate escape room. Haunted House. If you are invested in this series, it makes a fun enough installment. Proving simply creating dramatic suspense and tension using the grounded and likable character is a pretty easy formula for horror movie success, even if your antagonist is literally doing nothing. The Conjuring franchise is a force in the contemporary horror landscape. The same golden lens when touch that sparked franchising with Saw and the industry struck again on 2013 horror hit, which struck box office gold and have survived New Line Cinema. I got the house that Freddy built as a dominant player. The Conjuring has a full-blown horror universe shared with the Annabelle, the Nun, and the Curse of the La Llorona. And it's time for some of those delightful callback and the crossover that can make a cinematic universe so satisfying. With Annabelle Comes Home, the Conjuring verse essentially gets its fast five, so to speak, a non-stop thrill ride that while introducing new player with a spine of potential after one. New Line and Conjuring was screenwriting regular Gary Hope apprentice for Annabelle. Annabelle Creation and the Nun make his directorial debut on Annabelle's Come Home, for which he also wrote the script and he knocks it out the park with a delightful piece of popcorn horror. Returned as Ed and Lorraine Warren, he charming the demonologist and the paranormal investigator at the heat of the Vance Conjuring films. Set in 1971, the film finds events after the events of the first Conjuring film, when Annabelle is safely tucked away in their artifact room and the fallout from their growing controversial reputation as exorcist reaps on unfortunate social toll on their own young daughter. Judy, who shares some of the mother's frightening gift, Jobersman smartly willed the Warrens as a straight shot to the core of the franchise, before sending the season's paranormal force out of the picture, turning the spotlight to Judy for a lighter, more adventurous, and youthful approach to the material. With the Warrens making the headline, the local parents are up in arms about exposing their kid to fear of mortality and otherworldly threat, which struck especially hard for Judy, who finds herself not only the subject of school ground taunt, but with her birthday fast approaching, keeps getting a steady string of no replies to her party invitation. Thankfully, she's got on one heck to cool, kind-hearted babysitter in Mary Ellen, who makes it her mission to cheer the young girl up when he wants head out for a weekend trip, home and birthday cake at all. Jodie and Mary Ellen plans a quiet celebration at home. But when Mary Ellen's rebellious and inclined best friends Daniel tag along, everything gets terrifying in a hurry. Driven by a recent family tragedy, Daniel wastes no time breaking into the artifact room and oops, she lets Annabelle out of the demonic doll's chapel glass case. As it turns out, Annabelle is basically a supercharged Wi-Fi hotspot for other ghosts, ghouls, and the creature of the night, whose supreme life and tournament the grease and mess its host. Doberman has an absolute arsenal of creepy creature at his disposal, from the titular doll to a long-awaited iconic war case and a few new chilling ghoulish inventions. And he does not waste a beat. Doberman throws it all on the wall, colorful, wigs appear, beast of family creepy and bored done. There's even a Twilight Zone EQ television set that reveals horrifying vision of the future and makes for some excellent set pieces. And why Annabelle Comes Home loves a good set pieces is right at home in the established house style of the Conjuring verse, energetic, polished, playing into the signature build-up and misdirections of the familiar franchise figure. He also has some fun with the throwing in the plenty of fun callback and Easter egg for franchise fans. Taberman faces to the challenge of making an unmoving doll scary, and Annabelle herself gets some of her creepiest moment yet. But perhaps the film's most inspired stroke is that not just an Annabelle film. It's packed to the brim with the creepy creature to keep the audiences and their toes. And if Doberman's been keeping notes from when long the way, he's also been learning from his other creative colleague And as much as Annabelle Comes Home feels like a fake conjuring entry, it also shares some creative DNA with Doberman's other new line horror it. IT Doberman's penned the script for the Stephen King adaptation, and more than any of his previous Conjuring verse script, you will find a similar scene of heart and humor in Annabelle Comes Home. Like most in horror, the kids make some infantry foolish decisions along the way, but Dobermans ultimately ground them in enough emotional truth to make you feel for and fear for the character in the end. Annabelle Comes Home also share artist funhouse structure and Doberman shows a skilled hand at balancing scare with punches of comedic and emotional relief, lining up a rollercoaster of thriller and chills that keeps your heart racing and a smile plastered on your face. Across the board, Annabelle Comes Here is a blast from start to finish, a horror fueled babysitting adventure that sends the plucky teens into a barrel and watch them persist down the out. One of the biggest compliments I can give is such an energetic, fun loving horror film that is bound to become a regular in my Halloween season watch list. Throw in a couple of the standoff sporting character. Be prepared to fall in love with a sweet young man named Bob. Gary Doberman's Annabelle Comes Home is on many fronts an underwhelming directorial debut. The standard performances by all three female leads are unfortunately overshadowed by a weak plot. Some might even label the films a fast food horror. Annabelle Comes Home is third installment in the horror series Annabelle franchise and the seventh in the Conjuring franchise, which takes place in the same cinematic universe. A major part of the movie is set in the Warren household, following Judy Warren's babysitter Mary Allen and her up to no good friend. Daniela radios and fight dynamic entitled, brought to life by the movie's antagonist, a haunted porcelain doll named Annabelle. In many ways, Annabelle possesses all the elements of the new stereotypical modern-day horror film. What makes the movie stand out among others in the same genre, however, is the way in which the Doberman divert from the usual formulaic horror storyline and gives every character a purpose and clear motivation as to why they acted the way they did. This makes even their most frustrating and foolish section relatable, like when Daniela opened the glass case, which is labeled "Positively do not open" to let Annabelle out. It is later revealed that she was trying. The third Annabelle movie, like its predecessor, remains strong in meticulous employment of jump scare. In an age where jump scares have become so predictable that cinema goers start to cover their eyes every time the camera pans out. Doberman with Annabelle Comes Home set try for something different by deflating seemingly predictable jump scare and completely shaking you to your core when you least expect it. The intimate setting of the house, coupled with its air Victorian decor, give the director the opportunity to creatively explore his option in this realm. However, unpredictable jump scare on its own cannot successfully drive a plot forward. Annabelle Comes Home, much like the first Annabelle, falls prey to weak and seemingly effortless narrative. The single locations perfect for a jump scare, in this case, did not allow writer to do much with the actual story. It felt like nothing more than a well-built haunted house. Some critics have deemed the third installment of Annabelle an unnecessary film, going so far as to call it a money move. The trailer of the film is also a letdown. Ed and Lorraine Warren's protagonists of the highly acclaimed earlier Conjuring films appear for a significant part of the trailer. Yet in the movie itself, they are not present to witness any of the demonic activity. In addition to this, the antagonist of the movie itself, Annabelle, is missing for the most part. While watching the films, I hear someone seated behind me jokingly remark, "I think we bought ticket for Toy Story 4 by mistake." In retrospect, that is exactly what it felt like. I hear people laugh more than I hear them scream. There was a sandpit of comic relief in the film that came with the introduction of Bob Palmieri. Mary Ellen's cute boyfriend. Every scene he was in from hiding in a chicken coop to being chased by a hellhound had a audiences laughing however. Even it did not complement the movie's genre or even satisfy the expectations of fans of the franchise. Annabelle Comes Home provided a unique twist to what would have been otherwise been just another disappointing horror movie. Mira puts in the performances of her life as a seeing diver. Shamira generous, vain, and insecure by turns. Her relationship with the young engine Neha, played by Amna Elias, lies at the heart of the story. The film wastes no time setting up its premise as the opening shot depicts a gold jumpsuit clad Mira washing up John's movie during a film shoot. She is replaced by the sizzling Mavish Hayat, a tongue in cheek choices since Hayat is the current film fatal of the silver screen. I thought Annabelle Comes Home was a very intense horror film. If I was not frightened all the very thought, I would have further appreciated the cinematography, attention to detail. I think this might be the franchise's best horror film to date, and that aspiring filmmaker in the genre could really take a page for this movie. While I get scared easily from horror film, I would definitely watch it again, albeit not for a while. For those unfamiliar with the previous film, Annabelle centers around a porcelain doll that doubles as a beacon for evil spirit. Annabelle was a little girl who passed away because of a car accident in the early 1900s, with her spirit attaching to the doll made in her remembrance. This consequently opened the door for all evil spirits to come and bring evil to the world via inhabiting the doll. Annabelle Come Home is about a possessed doll who awakens evil spirit in the artifact room after being let out of box. After being taken by Ed and Lorraine Warren, Annabelle was secured inside a glass case where she was contained, only for a guilt-ridden teenage girl to let her out. Annabelle then causes chaos throughout the night while the Warrens are not home, leaving only their daughter, her babysitter, and her friend. Annabelle they proceed to engage in a battle of within between the possessed doll and the little 10-year-old girl, who fight the unholy terror that's been unleashed. Annabelle features a lot of great moments, thanks in part to its amazing camera work, making me wish I could one day work with the film's great department. The movie unfortunately featured a lot of predictable points, such as Danielle Cathy starting everything by letting the Annabelle out of her box, just so she could see her dad. It was also very predictable when the girl entered proms the making loud noises, but I am sure if they did not, there would not be a movie. The fact that Daniel was going this for selfish reasons made me feel very bad for Mary Ellen's, particularly because of her asthma. There is a part in the Annabelle was Annabelle herself is baiting Mary Ellen and Judy to come and get her out of closest compared to the film more predictable scene. You know something was going to happen, but you just did not know what to expect from the outcome. Thanks to the lightning, the film set the scene up a play to split Mary Ellen and Judy up, and Annabelle can get her hands on Judy. The image of Annabelle in the center of a closest field with dead bodies, held by corpse that looked like a Mary Ellen, made it difficult for her to retrieve haunted doll. One of my criticisms with the Annabelle Comes Home was visual overview fog. At one point, Daniels was supposed to go, but she snuck back into the house because she stole some keys. For some reasons, there was a lot of fog that made it impossible for her to see 5 feet ahead. Other scenes managed to be more active, such as when a half-sleeping Jodie gets scared by Annabelle showing up in her bed. She jumps and knocks down her light, looking at the floor of the doll, only to find a shadow that appeared on that wall. I like this moment because it managed to be simple and complicated at the same time, allowing you to see different characters emerge throughout the movie only for the final figure to reveal itself as a home demon. The ending battle to get Annabelle back into her box was the film's best scene, mostly in how the demon's shadow from Jodie's room came alive. Detail in the character's model, particularly its pose-up, were amazing in how they managed to scary yet cool. This visual could hopefully be elaborated on in next film. The fight to contain the evil in such a small room was perfectly shot and liked how Judy managed to channel her mom's power in order to stand tall and fight back against the demon. Annabelle Comes Home featured a lot of intense moment and as I said before, I would gladly watch this movie again. If you get scared by a horror film, you should watch this movie. It is the perfect movie to go on a date with because you are going to want someone to discuss it with you afterward, as well as a shoulder to lean up on when the scary parts emerge. Annabelle features a lot of great moments thanks in part to its amazing camera work, making me wish I could one day work with the film's great department. The movie unfortunately featured a lot of predictable points, such as Daniel starting everything by letting Annabelle out of her box